Welcome to Poirot Stories, where Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot brings captivating mysteries to life. In the shadowed halls of Amber Hall, a priceless amulet vanishes from a locked case, its amber heart holding secrets older than the estate itself. Was it greed, revenge, or a hidden wound that drove the thief? As lies unravel and suspicions mount, only Hercule Poirot's little grey cells can pierce the deception. Who among the Ashburn family harbours the darkest secret? And what truth lies buried in the scent of lavender and the flicker of a candle? Discover the shocking truth in Hercule Poirot and the mystery of the Amber Amulet. Chapter 1. The Gathering at Amber Hall. The late summer sun cast a golden glow over Amber Hall, a sprawling Georgian estate nestled in the rolling hills of Devon. Its ivy-clad walls and tall chimneys stood as a testament to the grandeur of the Ashburn family. Whose lineage traced back to the reign of Queen Anne, the estate was a picture of serenity, with manicured gardens stretching toward a shimmering lake. Yet beneath its polished exterior simmered a tension that Captain Arthur Hastings could not quite place. He stood at the edge of the gravelled drive, adjusting his tie, and glanced at his companion Hercule Poirot, whose small, precise steps betrayed none of the unease Hastings felt. "It is a fine house, mon ami," Poirot remarked, his green eyes gleaming as they surveyed the scene. "But the beauty of a house, it often conceals the discord within. N'est-ce pas?" Hastings nodded absently, his attention caught by the guests arriving for the weekend's festivities. The occasion was the unveiling of the Amber Amulet, a fabled Ashbourne heirloom said to be worth a fortune and steeped in family legend. Lady Eleanor Ashbourne, the widowed matriarch of the family, had invited a select group to witness its return to the family vault after years in a London bank. Hastings, invited through a distant connection to the Ashbournes, had persuaded Poirot to join him, sensing the detective's penchant for unravelling human mysteries might find amusement in the gathering. The guests were an eclectic mix, each arriving with their own air of purpose or pretense. There was Sir Reginald Ashbourne, Lady Eleanor's eldest son, a portly man in his 50s, with a penchant for cigars and a reputation for reckless investments. His younger brother Charles Ashbourne, a gaunt, scholarly figure, arrived with his wife Beatrice, whose sharp eyes missed nothing. Their daughter Clara, a vivacious young woman of 22, flitted about with an air of restless energy, her laughter echoing across the lawn. Then there was Dr. Harold Vance, a family friend and physician, whose calm demeanour seemed at odds with the nervous tic in his left hand. Miss Evelyn Carter, Lady Eleanor's private secretary, moved with quiet. His familiar smile set Hastings's teeth on edge. "An interesting assembly," Poirot murmured, stroking his mustache. "Each one, I think, has a story they do not wish to tell." The evening began with a lavish dinner in the oak-paneled dining room. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above a table laden with silver and fine china. Lady Eleanor, resplendent in a gown of emerald silk, presided with regal poise. Her voice, though soft, carried the weight of authority as she spoke of the amulet's history, a relic from an Ashbourne ancestor who had travelled to the Baltic in the 17th century, returning with the amber jewel said to hold mystical properties. "It is not merely a gem," she said, her eyes sweeping the table. "It is a symbol of our family's enduring strength. Tomorrow, it will be returned to its rightful place in the vault." The guests murmured their approval, though Hastings noted the undercurrents of unease. Sir Reginald's laugh was too loud, Charles's silence too pronounced, and Clara's glances toward Victor Langston carried a curious intensity.
Poirot, seated beside Hastings, sipped his wine and observed, his expression one of serene detachment. After dinner, the party retired to the drawing room, where a fire crackled in the hearth. The conversation turned to the amulet, and Victor Langston spoke at length about its craftsmanship, his voice oily with enthusiasm. "The amber is flawless," he said, "and the gold setting is exquisite. It could fetch a king's ransom at auction." Lady Eleanor's lips tightened. "It will never be sold," she said firmly. "It belongs to Amberley Hall." As the evening wore on, Hastings felt the weight of the atmosphere grow heavier. Clara excused herself early, claiming a headache, while Charles and Beatrice exchanged whispered words in a corner. Sir Reginald, flushed with brandy, argued loudly with Dr. Vance about some financial matter. Poirot, ever the observer, leaned toward Hastings and whispered, "The little details, Hastings. These are what reveal the heart of the matter. Watch the hands, the eyes, the silences." At precisely 10 o'clock, Lady Eleanor rose, signaling the end of the evening. "We shall reconvene tomorrow at noon for the unveiling," she announced. The guests dispersed to their rooms, and Hastings, weary from travel, retired to his own chamber, a cozy room overlooking the lake. As he drifted to sleep, he could not shake the feeling that something was amiss. The next morning, the house was abuzz with preparations. Servants bustled about, polishing silver and arranging flowers. Hastings joined Poirot for breakfast in the morning room, where the detective was savoring a perfectly boiled egg. "You slept well, mon ami?" Poirot asked.
"Young Mademoiselle Clara. She has the air of one who knows more than she says. But we shall see, Hastings. We shall see." At 11 o'clock, the guests gathered in the grand hall, where a velvet-draped pedestal awaited the amulet. Lady Eleanor, dressed in somber black, stood beside it, her expression one of quiet pride. Victor Langston, holding a locked mahogany case, stepped forward to present the amulet. He opened the case with a flourish, revealing nothing. A gasp rippled through the room. The amulet was gone. Lady Eleanor's face paled, her hand clutching the edge of the pedestal. "This is impossible," she whispered. "The case was locked, and only I have the key." Sir Reginald swore under his breath, while Charles stared at the empty case in disbelief. Clara's eyes darted toward Langston, who looked genuinely shocked. Dr. Vance stepped forward, his voice calm but strained. "Perhaps it was misplaced," he suggested, though his words lacked conviction. Poirot, standing quietly at the back of the room, stepped forward, his small frame commanding attention. "Madame, messieurs, mademoiselle," he said, his voice clear and precise. "This is no mere misplacement. The Amber Amulet has been stolen, and Hercule Poirot will uncover the truth." Hastings felt a thrill of anticipation. He had seen Poirot at work before, and he knew that the detective's little gray cells were already turning, piecing together the puzzle. The guests, however, exchanged uneasy glances, each wondering what secrets the diminutive Belgian might uncover. As the morning unfolded, the tension in Amberley Hall grew palpable. The servants were questioned, the case examined, and the room searched, but no trace of the amulet was found. Poirot, with his notebook in hand, began to take note of every detail: the exact time of the unveiling, 11:02 a.m., the position of each guest, the weight of the mahogany case. Hastings watched, marveling at his friend's methodical precision. "Someone in this house knows more than they admit," Poirot said softly to Hastings as they stood in the hall. "The amulet is not merely a jewel. It is a key to something deeper. We must observe, mon ami,
and listen to what is not said. The stage was set, the players assembled, and the mystery of the Amber Amulet had begun. Hastings could only hope that Poirot's genius would unravel the truth before the shadows of Amberley Hall grew darker still. The Vanishing Jewel. The grand hall of Amberley Hall was a scene of controlled chaos in the moments following the discovery of the Amber Amulet's disappearance. The guests stood,
his sharp green eyes, his mustache twitching slightly as he absorbed every detail. Captain Arthur Hastings, at his side, felt the weight of the moment, his pulse quickening with the realization that a crime had been committed under their very noses. "It is a scandal," Sir Reginald Ashburn bellowed, his face ruddy with indignation. "That case was locked, and now the amulet is gone? Someone here is a thief." His accusation hung in the air, met with uneasy silence from the others. Poirot raised a hand, his gesture small but commanding. "Calm yourself, Sir Reginald," he said, his voice smooth as polished oak. "Hercule Poirot does not leap to conclusions. We shall proceed with order and method. First, we must establish the facts." Lady Eleanor, her voice trembling, spoke up. "The amulet was placed in the case by Mr. Langston yesterday evening, after he appraised it. I locked the case myself at precisely 8 o'clock, and the key has not left my possession." She produced a small ornate key from her reticule, holding it aloft for all to see. Victor Langston, the jeweler, nodded vigorously, his slick demeanor shaken. "I swear, Lady Eleanor, the amulet was in the case when I handed it to you. I examined it thoroughly. Flawless amber, gold filigree, a masterpiece. It was there." Poirot's eyes narrowed as he studied Langston. "And you, Monsieur Langston, you are certain no one tampered with the case after you gave it to Madame?" "Certain," Langston replied, though his hands fidgeted at his sides. "I handed it directly to Lady Eleanor, and she locked it immediately." Poirot turned to the assembled group. "And where was the case kept after it was locked?" "In the library," Lady Eleanor answered, "in a safe behind the portrait of Lord Henry Ashburn. Only I know the combination." Hastings glanced at Poirot, expecting a reaction, but the detective's face remained impassive. "Very well," Poirot said. "We shall examine the safe, the case, and the library. But first, I must ask each of you where you were between 8 o'clock last night and 11 o'clock this morning, when the case was opened." The guests exchanged wary glances, and Hastings noted the subtle shifts in their postures. Clara's fingers twisting her necklace, Charles Ashburn's rigid stance, Beatrice's pursed lips. The air was thick with unspoken secrets. Sir Reginald spoke first, his voice blustering. "I was in the billiard room until midnight, playing with Dr. Vance. Then I went to bed. This morning I was in my room until breakfast at 9. Dr. Harold Vance nodded in confirmation. "That's correct. We played until late. I retired to my room afterward and was in the dining room by 9 this morning." Charles Ashburn cleared his throat, his scholarly demeanor strained. "I was in the library until 10, reading. Beatrice was with me for a time. Then she went to gardens before breakfast." Beatrice, her sharp eyes darting toward her husband, added, "I left the library at 9:30 and went to my room. I was at breakfast with everyone else." Clara, her voice light but tinged with nervousness, said, "I had a headache, as you know, Monsieur Poirot. I went to my room at 9 and stayed there until this morning. I joined the others at 10 for coffee in the drawing room." Miss Evelyn Carter, the secretary, adjusted her spectacles. "I was organizing Lady Eleanor's correspondence in the study until 10, then I retired. This morning I was up at 7, working in the study until the unveiling." Langston, mopping his brow with a handkerchief, said, "I was in my room after dinner, reviewing my notes on the amulet. This morning I joined the others for breakfast at 9, Poirot scribbled in his notebook, his movements precise. "Bon. And the servants.
We must speak with them as well. Lady Eleanor summoned the butler, Mr. Grayson, a stooped man with a face like weathered parchment. He confirmed that the staff had been busy with their duties, and none had entered the library after 8 o'clock. The footman, James, and the maid, Mary, echoed his account, though Mary's eyes flickered nervously when questioned. Poirot turned his attention to the mahogany case, examining it with a magnifying glass he produced from his pocket. "The lock is intact," he murmured. "No signs of tampering. Curious, n'est-ce pas?" He then requested to see the safe in the library. The library was a grand room lined with leather-bound books and dominated by a massive portrait of Lord Henry Ashbourne, Lady Eleanor's late husband. Behind the portrait was a steel safe, its door slightly ajar. Lady Eleanor gasped. "I locked it last night. I am certain of it." Poirot inspected the safe, his fingers tracing the edges. No scratches, no marks of force. The combination was entered correctly. This suggests someone knew the numbers, or the safe was never locked. Lady Eleanor's face flushed with indignation. "I locked it myself, Monsieur Poirot." "I am not mistaken." Poirot inclined his head. "I do not doubt your sincerity, madame. But the facts, they speak for themselves." As the morning progressed, the local police were summoned, led by Inspector Caldwell, a gruff man with a penchant for quick conclusions. He immediately fixated on Victor Langston, whose nervous demeanor and role as the last to handle the amulet made him an obvious suspect. "You had the opportunity, Langston," Caldwell barked, "and a jeweler like you would know the amulet's value." "Where is it?" Langston protested, his voice rising. "I'm no thief. I've built a reputation over 20 years. Why would I risk it?" Poirot intervened, his tone soothing but firm. "Inspector."
Poirot moved through the library, his eyes lingering on a small table near the window. A vase of roses stood upon it, one petal lying on the floor. Poirot bent to retrieve it, turning it over in his fingers. "Interesting," he murmured, then slipped the petal into his pocket. The guests were dismissed to their rooms, under strict instructions not to leave the estate. Inspector Caldwell stationed 2 constables at the entrances, though he grumbled about Poirot's interference. "This is a simple case," he muttered to Hastings. "Langston's our man. Mark my words." Hastings, loyal to Poirot, shook his head. "I wouldn't be so sure, Inspector. Poirot has a way of seeing what others miss." As the afternoon wore on, Poirot and Hastings retired to the drawing-room, where Poirot sipped a tisane and gazed out at the lake. "What do you make of it, Hastings?" he asked, his voice deceptively casual. "It's baffling," Hastings admitted. "The case was locked, the safe was secure, and yet the amulet is gone. Could it have been misplaced?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Misplaced? No, mon ami. This is no accident. The amulet was taken deliberately, and the thief is among us. But the question is not only who, but why. The amulet's value is great, yes, but there is something more, something personal." Hastings frowned. "You think it's more than a theft for profit?" "I think," Poirot said, tapping his temple, "that the little grey cells, they tell me this crime is rooted in the heart. Greed, yes, but also passion, revenge, or perhaps a secret long buried. We must dig deeper, Hastings." The day drew to a close with no sign of the amulet. The guests dined in strained silence, their eyes darting to one another, each wondering who among them was capable of such a theft. Poirot, ever observant, noted the way Clara avoided Langston's gaze, the way Sir Reginald's hand trembled as he poured his wine, the way Beatrice whispered urgently to Charles in the corridor. As night fell, Hastings felt a chill that had little to do with the evening air. The mystery of the Amber Amulet had deepened, and he knew that Poirot's methodical mind was already piecing together the puzzle. But the truth, he sensed, was still hidden in the shadows of Amberley Hall. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Hercule Poirot. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of Amberley Hall, its golden rays doing little to dispel the pall of suspicion that had settled over the estate. The theft of the Amber Amulet had transformed the grand house into a stage for whispered accusations and guarded glances. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing by a window in the drawing-room, watched the constables patrolling the grounds, their presence a stark reminder that Amberley Hall was now a crime scene. "Besides," Poirot said, setting his cup down with precision, "you are troubled, yes? You feel the weight of this mystery, but you must trust that order and method will reveal all." Hastings sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's just so confoundedly baffling, Poirot. A locked case, a secure safe, and yet the amulet vanishes without a trace, and everyone seems to have an alibi." Poirot's green eyes twinkled. "An alibi, Hastings, is like a well-tailored suit. It appears impeccable until you examine the stitching. We shall unravel these alibis, thread by thread." The morning's events had drawn the attention of the local authorities, and Inspector Caldwell, with his brusque manner and unwavering focus on Victor Langston, had made little progress. Poirot, however, had insisted on a more systematic approach. He had spent the early afternoon examining the library, the safe, and the mahogany case, his magnifying glass glinting as he scrutinized every surface. Now, he was ready to begin his interviews, a process he approached with the precision of a surgeon. The first to be summoned was Lady Eleanor Ashbourne, who entered the drawing-room with the dignity of a queen, though her pale face betrayed her distress. She sat opposite Poirot, her hands folded tightly in her lap, the ornate key to the mahogany case resting on the table between them. "Madame," Poirot began, his voice soft but probing, "you are certain the safe was locked last night after you placed the case inside?" Lady Eleanor nodded firmly. "Absolutely, Monsieur Poirot. I entered the combination myself at 8:15, after Mr. Langston handed me the case. I checked the lock before retiring." "And the combination," Poirot continued, "it is known only to you?" "Yes," she replied, her voice steady. "It has been the same for years, a sequence chosen by my late husband. No one else could know it." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And yet the safe was found open this morning. Tell me, madame, who has access to the library at night?" "The library is not locked," Lady Eleanor admitted. "The servants have their duties, and the family may use it freely. But the safe is hidden behind the portrait, and only I know its location." Poirot made a note in his small black notebook, his handwriting meticulous. "Merci, madame. You have been most helpful." Next came Sir Reginald Ashbourne, whose bluster filled the room like a gust of wind. He paced before the fireplace, his cigar leaving a trail of smoke. "This is an outrage, Poirot," he declared. "That jeweler, Langston, he's the culprit, mark my words. Shifty fellow, always talking about the amulet's value." Poirot tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "You distrust Monsieur—" "Last night," muttering to himself. "And where were you, Sir Reginald, between 8 o'clock last night and the unveiling this morning?" Sir Reginald puffed out his chest. "Told you already. Billiards with Vance until midnight, then bed. Up at 8, breakfast at 9. Ask anyone." Poirot nodded, his pen scratching softly. "And you saw nothing unusual in the billiard room? No one passing by, no sounds from the library?" "Nothing," Sir Reginald said, though his eyes flickered briefly toward the window. "All quiet." The interviews continued, each guest offering their account with varying degrees of confidence or unease. Charles Ashbourne, pale and reserved, confirmed his time in the library until 10,
reading a volume of Keats. His wife, Beatrice, corroborated his story, but added that she had heard footsteps in the corridor around 9:30, though she could not say who it was. Clara, her vivacity dimmed, repeated her claim of retiring early with a headache, her fingers nervously twisting a lace handkerchief. Dr. Harold Vance, calm but with that persistent tick in his hand, confirmed his billiard game with Sir Reginald and claimed to have seen nothing out of the ordinary. Miss Evelyn Carter, the secretary, was the most composed, her answers precise and clipped. "I was in the study until 10, organizing Lady Eleanor's papers. I saw no one enter or leave the library. This morning I was at my desk by 7. Victor Langston, visibly shaken, protested his innocence with fervor. "I'm a jeweler, not a thief, Monsieur Poirot. I handled the amulet with care, placed it in the case, and gave it to Lady Eleanor. I swear it was there." Poirot's questions were relentless yet polite, probing for inconsistencies. "And you, Monsieur Langston, you did not return to the library after dinner?" "No," Langston exclaimed, mopping his brow. "I was in my room, reviewing my appraisal notes. Ask the maid. She brought me tea at 9. The maid, Mary, when questioned, confirmed delivering tea to Langston, but admitted she had been in the servants' quarters most of the evening, unable to account for the library's comings and goings. The butler, Mr. Grayson, and the footman, James, offered similar accounts, their duties keeping them away from the library after 8. As the interviews concluded, Poirot led Hastings to the library for a private discussion. The room was dim, the afternoon light filtering through heavy curtains. Poirot stood before the portrait of Lord Henry Ashbourne, his eyes tracing the frame. "This portrait," he mused, "it is heavy, yes, not easily moved, yet the safe was opened without force." Hastings frowned. "You think someone knew the combination?" But Lady Eleanor was adamant. "Adamant, yes," Poirot interrupted, "but the human memory, it is fallible. And the human heart, it is secret."
Symbol. A key to something greater. Poirot knelt by the small table near the window, where the vase of roses stood. He retrieved another petal from the floor, comparing it to the one in his pocket. "These petals," he said softly, "they are not from the same rose. One is fresh, the other wilted. Why, I wonder? Are they here?" Hastings stared, baffled. "A servant's carelessness, perhaps." Poirot smiled faintly. "Carelessness, mon ami? No. In a house like this, every detail has purpose. These petals, they tell a story." As evening approached, Inspector Caldwell stormed into the library, his face red with frustration. "We've searched Langston's room. Nothing. But I'm not convinced. He's hiding something, Poirot." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Perhaps, Inspector, but the truth, it is not found by chasing the obvious. We must look deeper into the shadows of motive and opportunity." The inspector grunted, unconvinced, and left to question the servants again. Hastings, watching Poirot, felt a familiar mix of admiration and exasperation. "You've got something up your sleeve, haven't you?" he said. "Those petals, the safe, what are you thinking?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "I am thinking, Hastings, that the theft of the Amber Amulet is but the surface of a deeper crime. The clues are here, in the silences, the glances, the things left unsaid. We must listen, mon ami, and we must watch." As night fell, the guests gathered for dinner, their conversation stilted and strained. Clara's laughter was forced, Sir Reginald's temper flared over trivialities, and Beatrice's sharp eyes seemed to pierce every face at the table. Poirot, serene as ever, observed it all, his mind a whirl of connections and contradictions.
Hastings, lying awake that night, could not shake the image of the empty case, the missing amulet, and Poirot's cryptic words. The mystery was deepening, and he knew that his friends' little grey cells were already at work, weaving a net to catch the truth. Chapter 4. The questions deepen. The morning following the theft of the Amber Amulet dawned grey and heavy, with clouds rolling over the Devon hills, casting Amberley Hall in a sombre light. The air inside the estate was no less oppressive, as the guests moved through the corridors with the wariness of actors in a play they did not fully understand. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing by the window of the morning room, watched raindrops begin to speckle the glass, his mind replaying the events of the previous day. Beside him, Hercule Poirot sat with a cup of hot chocolate, his demeanor as composed.
Amulet is gone. And those petals you keep fussing over, what do they mean?
Poirot's mustache twitched with amusement.
Patience, Hastings. The petals, they are like the words in a sentence, small but essential to the meaning. Today we shall ask more questions, and the answers, they will reveal the shape of the truth.
The morning was dedicated to a deeper investigation, with Poirot insisting on re-interviewing the guests and examining the scene of the crime with fresh eyes. Inspector Caldwell, still fixated on Victor Langston, had reluctantly agreed to let Poirot take the lead, grumbling about fancy foreign methods. The guests, summoned one by one to the library, wore expressions ranging from irritation to outright unease. Poirot began with Clara Ashbourne, whose youthful exuberance seemed dimmed by the weight of suspicion. She sat across from him, her hands clasped tightly, her blue eyes darting toward the door as if expecting rescue. "Mademoiselle Clara," Poirot said gently, "you retired early last night, you say, with a headache."
Yet, you were seen in the corridor near the library at 9:30. Can you explain this?
Clara's cheeks flushed. I needed air," she stammered. "My room felt stuffy, so I stepped out for a moment. I didn't go into the library, I swear." Poirot's gaze was steady. "And did you see anyone else in the corridor, mademoiselle?" Clara hesitated, her fingers twisting her necklace. I thought I heard footsteps, but I saw no one. It was dark, and I was feeling unwell." Poirot made a note, his pen moving with deliberate care. "Merci, mademoiselle. You may go, but reflect, if you please, on the importance of precision in such matters." Next came Beatrice Ashbourne, whose sharp features and piercing gaze gave her the air of a hawk. She sat rigidly, her hands folded in her lap. "Monsieur Poirot," she said before he could speak, "I assure you I have nothing to hide. I was with my husband in the library until 9:30. Then I went to bed." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "And these footsteps you mentioned yesterday, madame, those you heard at 9:30. Can you describe them? Was they heavy, light, hurried?" Beatrice frowned, as if the question caught her off guard. "Light, I think. Quick, like someone trying not to be noticed. But I couldn't say who it was." "Interesting," Poirot murmured, jotting in his notebook. "And your husband, he heard these footsteps as well?" Beatrice's lips tightened. "Charles was engrossed in his book. I doubt he noticed anything."
His billiard game with Dr. Vance, though he admitted to stepping outside for a cigar around 10. "Needed a breath of air," he said gruffly. "Nothing suspicious about that." Dr. Vance, calm but with that persistent tick in his hand, confirmed the billiard game, but mentioned seeing Clara in the corridor when he returned to his room. She looked distressed,
he said. I offered to fetch her a tonic, but she declined. Miss Evelyn Carter, the secretary, maintained her composure, her answers as precise as a ledger. I was in the study until 10, then I retired. I saw nothing, heard nothing. My work keeps me busy, Monsieur Poirot. Victor Langston, still under Caldwell's scrutiny, was visibly agitated. I've told you I didn't touch the amulet after giving it to Lady Eleanor. I was in my room all evening, and the maid can vouch for me. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And yet, Monsieur Langston, you were seen near the library at 10:15 by the footman, James. How do you explain this? Langston paled. I stepped out to ask for more ink. My pen ran dry. I didn't go into the library. Poirot made another note, his expression inscrutable. After the interviews, he led Hastings back to the library, where he examined the safe once more. The combination, he mused. It is a simple sequence, yes? 4 numbers, and yet Lady Eleanor insists only she knew it. Hastings frowned. You think someone else knew the combination? But how? Poirot smiled faintly. The mind, Hastings. It is a curious thing. It holds secrets even from itself. Perhaps the combination was seen, overheard, or deduced. He moved to the small table by the window, where the vase of roses stood. Retrieving the 2 petals from his pocket, he held them up to the light. These petals, he said, one fresh, one wilted. They were not dropped by accident. Someone placed them here, perhaps as a signal, perhaps as a distraction. Hastings stared, bewildered. A signal? For whom? Poirot's eyes gleamed. That, mon ami, is what we must discover. The thief is clever, but not clever of an Hercule Poirot. As the afternoon wore on, Poirot requested a map of Amberley Hall from Mr. Grayson, the butler. The map, drawn in meticulous detail, showed the layout of the ground floor, including the library, the billiard room, the drawing room, and the corridors connecting them. Poirot studied it intently, his finger tracing the path from the library to the guest rooms. The corridors, he murmured, they are the arteries of this house. And last night, they carried someone to the library. Inspector Caldwell, growing impatient, interrupted their study. We've searched every room, Poirot, he said. No sign of the amulet. I'm telling you, Langston's hidden it somewhere off the estate. Poirot shook his head. No, Inspector. The amulet—
Look not only for the jewel, but for the motive behind its theft.
The dinner that evening was a tense affair, with the guests barely touching their food. Clara's eyes were red, as if she had been crying, and Sir Reginald's temper flared when a servant spilled a drop of wine. Beatrice and Charles sat in silence, their hands brushing occasionally under the table, while Dr. Vance's tic seemed more pronounced. Langston, under Caldwell's watchful eye, ate little, his gaze fixed on his plate. Poirot, as always, observed everything, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the unease around him. After dinner, he drew Hastings aside in the drawing room. "The net is tightening, Hastings," he said softly. "The alibis, they begin to fray. The footsteps, the petals, the safe. These are the threads of the truth. Tomorrow we shall pull them together, Hastings." Lying awake that night, felt the weight of the mystery pressing upon him. The amulet was gone, the suspects were many, and the clues were maddeningly elusive. Yet he knew that Poirot's methodical mind was already weaving a solution, one that would reveal the truth hidden in the shadows of Amberley Hall. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The rain had ceased by the morning of the 3rd day at Amberley Hall, but the clouds hung low, casting a muted light over the estate that seemed to mirror the growing unease within its walls. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing in the morning room, sipped his coffee and watched the guests drift in for breakfast,
their faces marked by sleeplessness and suspicion. Hercule Poirot, seated at a small table with a plate of perfectly buttered toast, appeared as serene as ever, though his green eyes darted from face to face, cataloguing every nuance of expression. "Mon ami," Poirot said, leaning toward Hastings, "you observe how the air grows heavier. The thief is among us, and they know the net is closing. Today we shall see the red herrings rise to the surface." Hastings frowned, setting down his cup. "Red herrings? You think someone's deliberately misleading us?" Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "Always, Hastings. In a crime such as this, the guilty will cast shadows to obscure the truth. But Hercule Poirot, he sees through the shadows." The morning's investigation began with Inspector Caldwell, whose frustration was palpable. He had doubled down on his suspicion of Victor Langston, the jeweler, and now brandished a new piece of evidence, a scrap of paper found in Langston's room, bearing the words, "Amber, £50,000. Caldwell thrust it before Poirot, his voice triumphant.
"Cautious, Poirot. The man's a jeweler. He had the means, the motive, and the opportunity." Poirot inclined his head. "Perhaps. But let us not be blinded by the obvious. We shall speak with Monsieur Langston again." Langston, when summoned to the library, was a picture of nervous agitation. His hands trembled as he faced Poirot, Caldwell, and Hastings. "That note means nothing," he protested. "I was estimating the amulet's value for my appraisal. That's my job. I didn't steal it." Poirot's voice was calm but piercing. "And yet, monsieur, you were seen near the library at 10:15, despite claiming to be in your room. Why were you there?" Langston's face flushed. "I told you I needed ink. I spoke to the footman, James, in the corridor." "I didn't go into the library." Poirot made a note, his pen moving with deliberate precision. "And this note, it was written when?" "Yesterday afternoon, before dinner," Langston said, his voice rising. "I swear I'm innocent." Poirot dismissed him with a wave, turning to Caldwell. "The note, it is suggestive, yes, but not conclusive." "We must look beyond it," Caldwell muttered under his breath, but Poirot was already moving to the next phase of his investigation. He requested a private meeting with the servants, beginning with Mary, the maid. She entered the library, her eyes downcast, her hands twisting her apron. Poirot's tone was gentle, but probing. "Mademoiselle Mary, you brought tea to Monsieur Langston at 9 o'clock. Did you see anything unusual in the corridor?" Mary hesitated, her cheeks paling. I thought I saw someone near the library door, sir, but it was dark and I couldn't be sure. I didn't want to cause trouble." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Someone, you say? Man or woman? Tall or short?" "I couldn't tell, sir," Mary said, her voice barely a whisper. "It was just a shadow, moving quickly." Poirot nodded, dismissing her with a kind word, then turned to Hastings. "A shadow in the corridor, mon ami. This is most interesting. The library, it seems, was not so quiet as we thought." The investigation continued with a re-examination of the library. Poirot knelt by the small table near the window, where the vase of roses stood. He retrieved another petal from the floor, comparing it to the two in his pocket. "3 petals now," he murmured. "One fresh, one wilted, and one curious. This one is crushed, as if stepped upon." Hastings stared, bewildered. "Stepped on? By whom?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "That, Hastings, is what we shall discover.
the pet.
11, when the theft was discovered. Sir Reginald and Dr. Vance's billiard game held firm, but Clara's brief appearance in the corridor at 9:30, confirmed by Dr. Vance, raised questions. Beatrice's claim of hearing footsteps at the same time suggested someone else was abroad, and Langston's encounter with the footman at 10:15 added another layer of complexity. Poirot's scrutiny fell next on Miss Evelyn Carter, whose precise demeanour seemed almost too perfect. He questioned her again, his tone deceptively casual. "Mademoiselle Carter, you were in the study until 10, you say. Did you hear or see anything unusual from your position?" Evelyn adjusted her spectacles, her voice steady. "Nothing, Monsieur Poirot. The study is at the end of the corridor, and I was focused on my work." "And yet," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming, "the study is but a few steps from the library." "You heard no footsteps, no creak of a door?" Evelyn's composure faltered for a moment. "I may have heard a sound, but I thought it was the servants." I paid it no mind. Poirot made a note, his expression inscrutable. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful." As the day wore on, the focus on Langston intensified, fueled by Caldwell's insistence and the discovery of the note. The other guests, sensing an easy target, began to close ranks against him. Sir Reginald muttered about shady outsiders, while Clara avoided Langston's gaze entirely. Even Lady Eleanor, though restrained, seemed to regard him with suspicion. Poirot, however, remained unconvinced. He drew Hastings aside in the drawing room, his voice low. "The note, the footsteps, the shadow in the corridor. These are the red herrings, Hastings. They point to Langston, yes, but too neatly. The true thief is cleverer, hiding behind this distraction." Hastings frowned. "But who, then?" "Everyone has an alibi, and the safe was locked." Poirot tapped his temple. "The alibis. They are like a house of cards, impressive until you test their foundation. We must look to motive, Hastings. Why steal the amulet? For money, yes, but perhaps also for power, for revenge, or to protect a secret." The afternoon brought a new development. The footman, James, reported finding a small gold hairpin near the library door, half hidden under a rug. Poirot examined it closely, noting its delicate design. "This belongs to a lady," he said, "and it was dropped recently, for it is clean. Who among our guests wears such a pin?" Hastings thought of Clara, whose hair was often adorned with similar ornaments, but Poirot cautioned against hasty conclusions. "We shall inquire, mon ami, but discreetly." The hairpin and Charles exchanged whispered words. Sir Reginald's temper flared again, this time over a perceived slight from Dr. Vance, whose calm demeanour seemed increasingly strained. As the meal ended, Poirot rose, his small frame commanding attention. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, "the mystery of the Amber Amulet grows deeper. But rest assured, Hercule Poirot is not deceived by shadows. Tomorrow we shall uncover more of the truth." Hastings, retiring to his room, felt the weight of the day pressing upon him. The note, the hairpin, the petals, the footsteps, all swirled in his mind, a puzzle with too many pieces. Yet he knew that Poirot's little grey cells were at work, sorting through the red herrings to find the truth, hidden beneath the surface of Amberley Hall. A clue in detail. The fourth day at Amberley Hall dawned with a faint mist clinging to the Devon hills, lending the estate an ethereal quality that seemed to deepen the mystery of the Amber Amulet's theft. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing at his bedroom window, watched the mist swirl over the lake, his mind a whirl of questions. The hairpin, the petals, the footsteps in the corridor, each clue seemed to point in a different direction.
Yet Hercule Poirot's calm assurance gave him hope that the truth was within reach. In the breakfast room, Poirot sat with his customary cup of hot chocolate, his green eyes gleaming with a quiet intensity. "Mon ami," Poirot said, glancing at Hastings, "you are restless, yes? You wish to solve this puzzle at once, but the truth, it reveals itself only to those who observe the smallest details." Hastings sighed, stirring his tea. "I know you're onto something, Poirot, but I can't see it. That hairpin, do you think it's Clara's? And those petals, what do they mean?" Poirot's moustache twitched with a faint smile. "The hairpin, the petals, these are the threads of the tapestry, Hastings. Today, we shall find a detail that pulls them together." The morning's investigation began with Poirot's request to examine the library once more, this time focusing on the smallest elements of the scene. Inspector Caldwell, still fixated on Victor Langston, grumbled about wasting time, but allowed Poirot to proceed, his constable stationed at the estate's entrances. The guests, meanwhile, moved through the house like ghosts, their conversations hushed, their eyes wary. Poirot stood by the small table near the library window, where the vase of roses stood sentinel. He retrieved the 3 petals from his pocket, one fresh, one wilted, one crushed, and laid them carefully on the table. "These petals," he said to Hastings, "they are not mere decoration. They tell a story of timing and intent. The fresh—"
"Précisément," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "Deliberate or careless, it matters not. The petals were dropped at different times, suggesting someone visited this spot more than once. We must discover why Poirot's attention turned to the gold hairpin, which he held up to the light. Its delicate design, a tiny amber bead set in a gold filigree, matched the style of Clara's accessories, but Poirot cautioned against assumptions. "We shall inquire, Hastings, but discreetly. A hairpin may belong to any lady, or it may have been placed to mislead." The detective moved to the safe behind the portrait of Lord Henry Ashburn, his fingers tracing the steel edges. "The combination," he murmured, 4 numbers known only to Lady Eleanor. Yet the safe was opened without force. This suggests knowledge or perhaps observation. Hastings raised an eyebrow. "You think someone watched her enter the combination?" Poirot nodded. "It is possible. Or perhaps the combination is not as secret as she believes. We must test this hypothesis." Poirot requested a private audience with Lady Eleanor, who entered the library with her usual regal poise, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of anxiety. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "have you made progress? This theft is a stain on my family's honor." "Madame," Poirot replied, his tone gentle but firm, "I am close to the truth, but I must ask a delicate question. The combination to the safe, have you ever written it down, shared it, or entered it in the presence of another?" Lady Eleanor's lips tightened. "Never. It is a sequence chosen by my husband, known only to me. I am meticulous, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot inclined his head. "And yet, the safe was opened. Tell me, madame, do you ever leave the library door open when you use the safe?" Lady Eleanor hesitated. "Rarely, but it is possible. The servants are discreet, and the family knows not to disturb me." Poirot made a note, his pen scratching softly. "Merci, madame. You have been most helpful." Next, Poirot turned his attention to Clara, whose nervous demeanor had intensified. She entered the library clutching her handkerchief, her eyes red-rimmed. "Mademoiselle Clara," Poirot said, holding up the hairpin, "this was found near the library door. Is it yours?" Clara's breath caught, her fingers tightening on the handkerchief. It looks like mine, but I have several. I could have dropped it anywhere." Poirot's gaze was steady. "And yet, it was found here, near the library, where you were seen at 9:30 on the night of the theft. Can you explain this?" Clara's voice trembled. "I told you, I needed air.
I didn't go into the library, I swear it. Poirot nodded, dismissing her gently, but his eyes lingered on her retreating figure. She is frightened, Hastings, he said softly. But of what? The theft? Or something more? The investigation.
Closer examination of the library's surroundings. Poirot noted the position of the table, just beneath a window that overlooked the garden. The window was slightly ajar, its latch loose. Curious, Poirot murmured, inspecting the latch. This window could be opened from the outside, yet there are no footprints in the garden below. The thief, they worked from within. Hastings, trying to keep up, asked, "But how does that help us? Everyone was inside the house." Poirot smiled. "It tells us the thief is one of our circle, Hastings. The window, the petals, the hairpin, these are the details that betray them." As the afternoon unfolded, Poirot requested a meeting with the footman, James, who had seen Langston in the corridor at 10:15. James, a young man with a nervous stammer, confirmed his account, but added a new detail. "I saw Miss Clara earlier, sir, around 9:30, near the library door. She looked upset, like she'd been crying." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And did you see anyone else, Monsieur James? A shadow, perhaps, as Mademoiselle Mary described?" James hesitated, then nodded. "I thought I saw someone moving toward the back stairs, but it was dark. I couldn't be sure." Poirot made another note, his mind clearly racing. He then turned his attention to the library's bookshelves, running his fingers along the spines. Near the safe, he paused, pulling out a slim volume of poetry. Keats. The same book Charles Ashburn had claimed to be reading. A faint mark on the spine caught his eye. A smudge of amber-colored wax, barely visible. "This," Poirot said, holding the book up to Hastings, "is most significant. Wax, perhaps from a candle, left near the safe. And yet, the library is lit by electric lamps. Why a candle?" Hastings stared, bewildered. "Someone was in here at night, using a candle to avoid detection." "Précisément," Poirot said. "And this wax, it matches the amber of the amulet's bead. A coincidence?" "No, Hastings. There are no coincidences in a crime such as this." As evening approached, the tension in Amberley Hall grew palpable. Inspector Caldwell, frustrated by the lack of progress, continued to press Langston, while the other guests whispered among themselves, their suspicions shifting like the mist outside. At dinner, Clara barely touched her food, her eyes fixed on her plate, while Sir Reginald's bluster seemed forced, his hands trembling as he poured his wine. Beatrice and Charles sat close, their whispers barely audible, and Dr. Vance's tic was more pronounced than ever. Poirot, as always, observed it all, his calm demeanor a beacon in the storm. After dinner, he drew Hastings aside in the drawing room. "The wax, the hairpin, the petals, these are the details that will unravel the mystery, Hastings. The thief believed." The puzzle pieces shifting in his mind. The amber wax, the crushed petal, Clara's tears. What did they mean? He knew Poirot was close to a breakthrough, but the truth remained just out of reach, hidden in the intricate details of Amberley Hall. Chapter 7. More lies surface. The fifth day at Amberley Hall brought a shift in the atmosphere. As if the very walls of the estate were holding their breath, the mist had cleared, revealing a pale sun that did little to warm the tension gripping the household. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing in the morning room, watched the guests assemble for breakfast, their faces etched with fatigue and suspicion. Hercule Poirot, seated with his customary hot chocolate, seemed unaffected by the strain, his green eyes sharp and alert as they scanned the room. "Mon ami," Poirot said, leaning toward Hastings, "you observe how the masks begin to slip, the lies. They are like cracks in a dam, small at first, but soon they will burst." Hastings frowned, stirring his coffee. "You've found something, haven't you?"
That wax on the book, the hairpin, it's all starting to add up. Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. The details, Hastings. They are the threads of the truth. Today, we shall pull at these threads and see what unravels. The morning's investigation began with Poirot revisiting the library, where the amber-colored wax on the Keats volume had piqued his interest. He examined the bookshelf again, his fingers tracing the spines until he paused at another book, A History of Baltic Trade, its cover slightly askew. Pulling it out, he found a faint smudge of the same wax on the edge of a page. "Curious," he murmured, showing it to Hastings. "This wax, it appears in places where it should not. Someone used a candle in this library, and not for reading." Hastings raised an eyebrow. "But why a candle? The library has electric lights." Poirot nodded. "Précisément. A candle suggests secrecy, a need to avoid detection. The thief, they moved in the dark, and this wax is their footprint." Poirot's next move was to question the guests about their movements on the night of the theft, focusing on discrepancies in their alibis. He began with Sir Reginald Ashbourne, whose bluster had taken on a defensive edge. Seated in the library, Sir Reginald puffed on his cigar, his face flushed. "I've told you, Poirot," he said. "I was in the billiard room with Vance until midnight, then bed. What more do you want?" Poirot's tone was polite but probing. "And yet, Sir Reginald, you mentioned stepping outside for a cigar at 10. From the terrace, one can see the library window. Did you notice anything? A light? A shadow, perhaps?" Sir Reginald hesitated.
Troubles, Sir Reginald. Might they have tempted you to consider the amulet's value? Sir Reginald's face darkened. "How dare you?" "My affairs are private, Poirot. I'd never steal from my own family." Poirot inclined his head, dismissing him with a wave. "Merci, Sir Reginald. We shall speak again." Next came Beatrice Ashbourne, whose sharp gaze seemed to pierce through Poirot's calm demeanor. She sat rigidly, her hands folded in her lap. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "I've told you everything. I was in the library with Charles until 9:30. Then I went to bed." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the footsteps you heard, madame, those light, quick steps at 9:30, you are certain they came from the corridor?" Beatrice's lips tightened. "Yes, I'm certain. But as I said, I couldn't see who it was." "And your husband," Poirot continued, "he was reading Keats, yes? Did he leave the library at any point?" Beatrice hesitated, a flicker of unease crossing her face. "He may have stepped out briefly to fetch a glass of water, but he was back within minutes." Poirot made another note, his expression unreadable. "Merci, madame. You have been most illuminating." Charles Ashbourne, when questioned, appeared pale and distracted. "I was reading," he said, his voice soft. "I didn't notice any footsteps. Beatrice is more observant than I am." Poirot tilted his head. "And this brief absence, monsieur, to fetch water, when was this?" Charles frowned, as if struggling to recall. "Around 9:30, I suppose. I wasn't gone long." The interviews revealed new cracks in the alibis. Dr. Harold Vance admitted to leaving the billiard room briefly at 10 to check on Clara, who had seemed unwell. Clara, when questioned again, grew tearful, insisting she had only stepped into the corridor for air. Miss Evelyn Carter, the secretary, maintained her story of working in the study, but Poirot noted a slight tremor in her hand when asked about the library's proximity. Victor Langston, still under Inspector Caldwell's scrutiny, was visibly shaken. "I've told you. I was in my room," he protested. "That note about the amulet's value was just part of my appraisal." Poirot's questions turned to the hairpin. "Monsieur Langston, you are a jeweler. This hairpin,
with its amber bead. Have you seen it before? Langston examined it, his brow furrowing. It's fine work, but I don't recall it specifically. It could belong to any of the ladies here. Poirot's gaze lingered on him, and yet it was found near the library, where you were seen at 10:15. A coincidence, perhaps? Langston paled, stammering, I didn't go in, I swear it. As the morning progressed, Poirot,
A shadow near the library at 9. Can you recall anything more? A sound? A scent, perhaps? Mary twisted her apron, her voice barely audible.
I smelled something, sir, like lavender, but I didn't see who it was.
Poirot's eyes gleamed. Lavender, you say? Most interesting. Merci, mademoiselle. After Mary left, Poirot turned to Hastings. Lavender, Hastings, a scent associated with one of our ladies, perhaps. We must observe closely. The afternoon brought a startling revelation. While examining the library window, Poirot noticed a faint scratch on the sill, barely visible to the naked eye. This, he said, pointing to it, is recent, not deep enough to suggest forced entry, but perhaps the window was opened briefly, to pass something through. Hastings frowned. Pass the amulet to an accomplice outside? Poirot shook his head. Non, mon ami, the amulet is still within these walls. This scratch suggests movement, perhaps a distraction. We must consider all possibilities. The investigation uncovered another lie when the footman, James, admitted to overhearing a heated argument between Sir Reginald and Dr. Vance in the billiard room around 10. It was about money, James said, his stammer worsening. Sir Reginald was shouting about a loan that wasn't repaid. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And you did not mention this before, Monsieur James. James flushed. I didn't want to cause trouble, sir. It didn't seem important. Poirot made a note, his expression inscrutable. Everything, monsieur, is important in a case such as this. Dinner that evening was a tense affair, with the guests barely speaking. Sir Reginald's temper flared when a servant dropped a spoon, while Clara's eyes remained red-rimmed, her hands trembling. Beatrice and Charles sat close, their whispers urgent, and Dr. Vance's tic was more pronounced than ever. Langston, isolated at the table's end, looked like a man awaiting judgment. After dinner, Poirot drew Hastings aside in the drawing-room. The lies, they multiply, Hastings, he said softly. Sir Reginald's financial troubles, Charles's absence from the library, Clara's tears, the scent of lavender. These are the cracks in the facade. The truth is close, mon ami Hastings. Lying awake that night, felt the mystery tightening around him. The amber wax, the lavender scent, the scratched window, what did they mean? He knew Poirot was piecing together the puzzle, but the truth remained elusive, hidden in the web of lies that enveloped Amberley Hall. The emotional turning point. The 6th day at Amberley Hall broke with a fragile stillness. The sun, guests at breakfast. Hercule Poirot, sipping his hot chocolate with his usual precision, seemed to sense the shift, his green eyes gleaming with anticipation. Mon ami, Poirot said, leaning towards Hastings. Today we shall see the cracks widen. The heart it cannot hide forever, and someone will break under the pressure of their secrets. Hastings nodded, his coffee untouched. You're close to something, Poirot. I can feel it. That lavender scent, the wax, Clara's tears, they're all connected, aren't they? Poirot's moustache twitched with a faint smile. The connections, Hastings. They form a pattern. Today, we shall pull at the thread that unravels it. The morning began with Poirot's decision to confront the guests as a group, a tactic he reserved for moments when psychological pressure could yield results. He requested their presence in the drawing room, where the heavy curtains were drawn back to let in the pale sunlight. The guests assembled reluctantly, their faces a mix of defiance, fear, and exhaustion.
Inspector Caldwell stood by the door, his arms crossed, still convinced that Victor Langston was the culprit, while Poirot took his place by the fireplace, his small frame commanding the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and measured. "The theft of the Amber Amulet is no simple crime. It is a tapestry woven of motive, opportunity, and deception. Each of you has a piece of this puzzle, and I, Hercule Poirot, intend to uncover it." The guests shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting to one another. Clara clutched her handkerchief, her face pale, while Sir Reginald's scowl deepened. Beatrice and Charles sat close, their hands touching, and Dr. Vance's tic was more pronounced than ever. Langston, isolated at the edge of the group, looked like a man on the verge of collapse. Poirot held up the gold hairpin, its amber bead catching the light. "This," he said, "was found near the library door. It belongs to one of the ladies present. Who will claim it?" A heavy silence followed. Clara's breath hitched and she opened her mouth as if to speak, but Beatrice cut in sharply. "It could be anyone's," she said. "Hairpins are hardly unique." Poirot's gaze lingered on Clara, who looked away, her hands trembling. "Indeed, madame," he said, "but this hairpin was dropped on the night of the theft, near the library. And there is more." He produced the 3 rose petals, laying them on the table before him. "These petals, one fresh, one wilted, one crushed, tell a story of movement and intent. Someone was in the library, not once, but several times." Sir Reginald snorted. "Petals? You're chasing nonsense, Poirot. Langston's your man. His note proves it." Poirot turned to Langston, who flinched under the scrutiny. "Monsieur Langston, you insist you were in your room, yet the
Scent of lavender, reported by the maid Mary near the library at 9. Tell me, do you use lavender, monsieur?" Langston shook his head vehemently. "No, I don't use scents. I'm a jeweler, not a perfumer." Poirot's eyes swept the room. "And yet the scent of lavender is associated with one of you. Mademoiselle Clara? Madame Beatrice? Mademoiselle Carter? Do any of you favor this fragrance?" Clara's face flushed, and she stammered, I have lavender water, but I didn't use it that night." Her voice cracked, and tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't take the amulet, Monsieur Poirot. I swear it." The room fell silent, the weight of her outburst hanging in the air. Hastings watched, his heart racing, as Poirot's expression softened. "Mademoiselle Clara," he said gently, "you are distressed. Why? What do you know that you have not told us?" Clara's hands twisted her handkerchief, and she shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. I can't say. It's not what you think." Beatrice rose, her voice sharp. "Leave her alone, Monsieur Poirot. She's just a girl, upset by all this nonsense." Poirot's gaze shifted to Beatrice, his eyes narrowing. "And you, madame, you are protective of Mademoiselle Clara. Why? Is there a secret you share?" Beatrice's lips tightened, but she said nothing, sitting back down beside Charles, who looked pale and tense. Poirot made a note in his notebook, his pen moving with deliberate care. "Very well," he said. "We shall return to this. But let us consider another detail. The amber wax found on a book near the safe. A candle was used in the library, where electric lights abound. Why?" Dr. Vance spoke up, his voice steady despite his tic. "Perhaps a servant was cleaning late and used a candle." Poirot tilted his head. "A possibility, monsieur, but unlikely. The wax matches the amber of the amulet's bead, suggesting a connection. And then there is the scratched windowsill, indicating movement, perhaps a signal, perhaps a distraction." The guests exchanged uneasy glances, and Hastings sensed the pressure mounting. Poirot's questions were like a scalpel, cutting through the layers of deception. He turned to Miss Evelyn Carter, whose composure seemed to falter under his gaze. "Mademoiselle Carter,
You were in the study, so close to the library. Did you truly hear nothing? No footsteps, no creak of a door. Evelyn adjusted her spectacles, her voice steady but strained. As I said, I was focused on my work. I heard nothing.
Guilt. But her tears, they are not only for herself. There is a deeper wound here, one we must uncover. The afternoon brought a new development. While inspecting the library, Poirot noticed a faint mark on the floor near the safe. A scuff, as if something heavy had been dragged. He knelt, examining it closely. This, he said, is recent. Not a servant's mark, but something else. Perhaps the portrait was moved, or something placed to obscure it. Hastings frowned. But the portrait is heavy. Surely it would take more than one person to move it? Poirot nodded. Or great determination. The thief, they are resourceful, Hastings. The investigation continued with a private conversation with the butler, Mr. Grayson, who admitted to noticing a faint smell of lavender in the corridor on the night of the theft, though he had thought little of it at the time. It's common enough, sir, he said. Miss Clara often uses it, and so does Mrs. Ashbourne Poirot's eyes gleamed. Most interesting, Monsieur Grayson. And this scuff mark, have you seen it before? Grayson shook his head. No, sir. The library is cleaned daily, and I'd have noticed. As evening approached, the tension in Amberley Hall reached a fever pitch. At dinner, Clara was absent, claiming illness, while Sir Reginald's temper flared over a trivial matter. Beatrice and Charles whispered urgently, and Dr. Vance's tic seemed to worsen with every passing minute. Langston, still under Caldwell's watchful eye, barely spoke, his face pale. After dinner, Poirot drew Hastings aside in the library. "The dam is breaking, Hastings," he said softly. "Clara's tears, the lavender, the wax, the scuff mark. These are the signs of a truth struggling to emerge. Tomorrow, we shall set a trap to catch it." Hastings, lying awake that night, felt the weight of Clara's outburst and the mounting clues. The mystery of the Amber Amulet was no longer just a theft. It was a tangle of emotions and secrets, and he knew Poirot was poised to unravel it. Chapter 9. The Trap. The seventh day at Amberley Hall dawned with a brittle clarity, the sun casting sharp shadows across the estate's manicured lawns. The tension within the house had become almost palpable, as if the very walls were straining under the weight of secrets waiting to be exposed. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing in the morning room, watched the guests gather for breakfast, their faces drawn and guarded. Hercule Poirot, seated with his usual hot chocolate, radiated a calm intensity, his green eyes flickering with the anticipation of a hunter nearing his quarry. "Mon ami," Poirot said, leaning toward Hastings, "today we shall set a trap. The thief, they believe they have outwitted us, but Hercule Poirot is not so easily deceived." Hastings stirred his coffee, his mind racing. "A trap? What do you have in mind, Poirot? Clara's outburst yesterday, she's hiding something, isn't she?" Poirot's moustache twitched with a faint smile. "Mademoiselle Clara, she is a key, but not the only one. The lavender, the wax, the scuff mark, these are the threads we shall pull to unravel the truth." Poirot's plan began to take shape after breakfast, when he requested a private meeting with Inspector Caldwell in the library. The inspector, still fixated on Victor Langston, was skeptical, but agreed to cooperate, his gruff demeanor softened by Poirot's persistent logic. "I don't see the point of all this theatrics," Caldwell muttered. "Langston's our man. His note proves it." Poirot shook his head. "Non, Inspector. The note, it is a distraction. The true thief is among us, and tonight we shall force their hand." Poirot's trap was deceptively simple. He announced to the guests that he had uncovered a new clue, a hidden compartment in the library where the amulet might be concealed. He requested their presence in the drawing room that evening at 8 o'clock, claiming he would reveal the compartment's location and search it in their presence. "The thief," he whispered to Hastings, "will be compelled to act. fearing their prize is about to be discovered. The day was spent in careful preparation. Poirot and Hastings revisited the library, where Poirot examined the scuff mark near the safe once more. "This mark," he said, pointing to the faint scrape on the floor, "it suggests the portrait was moved, but not by much." The thief needed access to the safe, but they were careful, perhaps too careful. Hastings frowned. "You think they moved the portrait themselves? But it's heavy. Wouldn't it take 2 people? Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Or 1 person with determination, Hastings. The scuff mark. It is slight, suggesting a single effort. And the wax, amber wax."
"Footprints," he murmured. "But the scratch, it is on the inside, not the outside. This was no accomplice. The window was open to create a false trail." As the afternoon progressed, Poirot questioned the servants again, focusing on the scent of lavender. The maid, Mary, confirmed that both Clara and Beatrice used lavender water. But she added a new detail. "I found a handkerchief in the corridor near the library, sir, the morning after the theft. It smelled of lavender, but I thought it was Miss Clara's and put it in her room." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A handkerchief, you say? And you are certain it was lavender?" Mary nodded, her hands twisting her apron. "Yes, sir. I know the scent well." Poirot dismissed her gently, then turned to Hastings. "A handkerchief, mon ami. Another thread in our tapestry. We must see this handkerchief." Clara, when questioned, produced a lace handkerchief from her room, but she claimed it was not the one Mary had found. "I have several," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't know which one it was." Her eyes were red, and she seemed on the verge of tears again. Poirot's questions grew sharper as he spoke with Beatrice, who denied owning a lavender-scented handkerchief. "I use lavender water occasionally," she admitted, "but I had no handkerchief in the corridor." Mary must be mistaken. The tension mounted as the evening approached. At 8 o'clock, the guests gathered in the drawing room, their faces a mix of curiosity and dread. Poirot stood by the fireplace, his small frame commanding attention. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "the Amber Amulet remains hidden, but I have discovered a clue, a hidden compartment in the library, behind the portrait of Lord Henry Ashbourne. Tonight, we shall search it together." A murmur rippled through the room. Sir Reginald snorted, "Another of your tricks, Poirot," while Clara's hands trembled and Beatrice's sharp eyes narrowed. Langston, pale and nervous, looked as if he might bolt, while Dr. Vance's tic worsened under the strain. Poirot led the group to the library, where the portrait loomed over the safe. He gestured to the wall behind it. "The compartment. It is here," he said, his voice deliberate. "But first we must ensure no one leaves this room." Inspector Caldwell stationed a constable at the door, and Poirot began to move the portrait, his movements slow and theatrical. As he did, he watched the guests, his eyes missing nothing. Clara's breath hitched, and Beatrice's hand tightened on Charles's arm. Sir Reginald shifted uncomfortably, and Langston mopped his brow. Suddenly, a faint noise came from the corridor, a soft thud, as if something had fallen. Poirot's head snapped up. "Inspector, quickly!" he said, and Caldwell rushed out, followed by Hastings. They found a small velvet pouch lying in the corridor.
Nothing. The pouch was empty. Poirot, joining them, examined the pouch with a magnifying glass.
"Interesting," he murmured. "This pouch, it is lined with silk, suitable for holding a jewel like the amulet, and it smells faintly of lavender." Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, and Beatrice's face paled. Poirot turned to the group, his voice calm but piercing. "Someone, it seems, has acted in haste. This pouch was dropped tonight, perhaps in an attempt to move the amulet before our search. Who among you was in the corridor just now?" Silence fell, heavy and oppressive. Then Clara, her voice breaking, cried out, "It wasn't me. I didn't take it, but I know something." She collapsed into a chair, sobbing, as the guests stared in shock. Poirot knelt beside her, his tone gentle. "Mademoiselle Clara, speak. What do you know?" Clara's tears flowed freely. "I saw someone in the library that night. I didn't want to say because I was afraid. But it wasn't me." "Who, mademoiselle?" Poirot pressed. "Who did you see?" Clara shook her head, her voice barely audible. "I can't say. Not yet. I'm sorry." Poirot rose, his expression unreadable. "Very well, mademoiselle. But the truth, it will not wait forever." The guests were dismissed, their faces pale and shaken. Caldwell, clutching the empty pouch, muttered about searching Clara's room, but Poirot shook his head. "Non, Inspector. The pouch, it is another thread, but not the whole tapestry. The trap has worked, the thief is nervous, and they have made a mistake." As night fell, Hastings sat with Poirot in the drawing room, his mind reeling. "Clara's hiding something, Poirot," he said. "But she's so young. Could she be protecting someone?" Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. "She is protecting someone, Hastings, but not necessarily the thief. The lavender, the pouch, the wax. These are the signs of a deeper motive. Tomorrow we shall reveal the truth." Hastings, lying awake that night, felt the mystery tightening around him. Clara's tears, the empty pouch, the scent of lavender, what did they mean? He knew Poirot's trap had shaken the thief, but the truth remained just out of reach, hidden in the shadows of Amberley Hall. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The 8th day at Amberley Hall dawned with an air of inevitability, as if the estate itself sensed that the mystery of the Amber Amulet was nearing its resolution. The sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the gardens, but within the house, the atmosphere remained charged with tension.
Poirot said, leaning toward Hastings. "Today we shall lay bare the truth. The thief, they have woven a clever web, but Hercule Poirot has untangled it."
Hastings stirred his coffee, his mind racing. "Clara's outburst last night, Poirot. That pouch, the lavender scent. It's all coming together, isn't it? You know who took the amulet." Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "The little gray cells, Hastings. They have been busy. Tonight we shall gather the guests, and the truth will be revealed." The morning was spent in final preparations. Poirot, with Inspector Caldwell's reluctant agreement, requested that all guests assemble in the drawing room at 7 o'clock that evening for what he called the denouement. Caldwell, still suspicious of Victor Langston, grumbled about the theatrics, but agreed, his constables stationed at the doors to ensure no one left the estate. The guests, aware of the impending confrontation, moved through the day with a nervous energy, their conversations hushed and their glances wary. Poirot spent the morning revisiting the library, his magnifying glass in hand as he examined the scuff mark, the amber wax, and the windowsill once more. "These clues," he said to Hastings, "they are like the notes of a symphony, each one small, but together they create the truth. The wax, the petals, the hairpin, the pouch, all point to a single conclusion." Hastings frowned. "But Clara, she saw someone in the library. Why won't she say who?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Mademoiselle Clara, she is protecting someone, but not the thief. Her tears, they are for a deeper wound. We shall see." The afternoon brought a final piece of evidence. While inspecting the corridor outside the library, Poirot noticed a faint mark on the wall,
a smudge of amber wax, identical to that found on the Keats volume. "This," he said, "confirms my theory. The thief used a candle, not for light, but to mark their path. A careless mistake, but a fatal one." At 7 o'clock, the guests gathered in the drawing-room, their faces pale and tense. Lady Eleanor sat at the head of the room, her regal poise strained by the ordeal. Sir Reginald stood by the fireplace, his cigar unlit, while Charles and Beatrice sat close, their hands clasped. Clara, her eyes red-rimmed, clutched her handkerchief, and Dr. Vance's tic was more pronounced than ever. Victor Langston, isolated at the edge of the group, looked like a man awaiting judgment, while Miss Evelyn Carter adjusted her spectacles, her composure faltering. Poirot stood before the fireplace, his small frame commanding the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and precise, "the theft of the Amber Amulet is a crime of cunning and deception."
Begin with the facts. The amulet was placed in a locked mahogany case by Monsieur Langston and given to Lady Eleanor at 8 o'clock. The case was locked in the safe, behind the portrait of Lord Henry Ashbourne, with a combination known only to Madame. Yet by 11 the next morning, the amulet was gone. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. The safe was opened without force, suggesting knowledge of the combination. The library was visited by someone that night, as evidenced by the rose petals, one fresh, one wilted, one crushed. A hairpin with an amber bead was found near the library door, and a scent of lavender lingered in the corridor. Amber wax marked a book and the wall, and a velvet pouch, empty but smelling of lavender, was dropped last night. Clara stifled a sob, and Beatrice's grip on Charles's hand tightened. Poirot continued, his voice unwavering. The obvious suspect, Monsieur Langston, was a convenient distraction. His note about the amulet's value was part of his appraisal, and his presence in the corridor at 10:15 was innocent. He sought ink, as the footman confirmed. But the true thief was cleverer, using these clues to mislead us. Poirot turned to Clara. "Mademoiselle Clara, you saw someone in the library that night, did you not? You were in the corridor at 9:30, seeking air, but you saw more than you admitted." Clara's tears spilled over, and she nodded. I saw my father, Charles. He was in the library, near the portrait. I didn't want to say. I was afraid for him." Charles's face paled, and Beatrice gasped. Poirot nodded. "Merci, mademoiselle. Your courage has helped us. But, Monsieur Charles, he is not the thief, though he played a part." Charles rose, his voice trembling. "I didn't take the amulet. I was looking for a book, that's all." Poirot's gaze shifted to Beatrice. "Madame Beatrice, you were in the library with your husband until 9:30. But you heard footsteps, light, quick steps. You knew they were not Clara's, for you saw her later. You also used lavender water, and a handkerchief scented with it was found in the corridor." Beatrice's eyes widened. "I told you, I have no such handkerchief." Poirot smiled faintly. "But you do, madame, and you dropped it deliberately to cast suspicion on Mademoiselle Clara. You are the thief." A collective gasp filled the room. Beatrice's face drained of color, and Charles cried out, "No, it can't be!" Poirot raised a hand. "Let me explain. Madame Beatrice, you knew the combination to the safe, having observed Lady Eleanor enter it during your time in the library. On the night of the theft, you returned after 9:30, using a candle to avoid the electric lights. You opened the safe, took the amulet, and hid it." "Clara's, placed to mislead us. The wax on the book and wall marked your path, and the lavender scent betrayed you." Beatrice shook her head, her voice rising. "This is absurd. Why would I steal the amulet?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Motive, madame.
You and Charles are in debt. Your finances strained by his scholarly pursuits. The amulet, worth a fortune, was your salvation. But more than that, you resented Lady Eleanor's control over the family's wealth. The amulet was a symbol of that power, and you sought to take it. Charles buried his face in his hands, and Clara sobbed. Lady Eleanor rose, her voice trembling. "Beatrice, how could you?" Beatrice's composure cracked, and she slumped in her chair, tears streaming down her face. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I only wanted to secure our future." Poirot nodded. "The amulet, madame. Where is it?" Beatrice hesitated, then pointed to the library bookshelf. "Behind the Baltic trade volume. There's a hollowed-out section." Caldwell rushed to the shelf, retrieving the amulet from a hidden compartment. The room fell silent as the amber jewel gleamed in the light. Poirot bowed slightly. "The case is closed." As the guests dispersed, shaken and subdued, Hastings turned to Poirot, his voice low. "You knew it was Beatrice all along, didn't you?" Poirot smiled. "The little gray cells, Hastings. They see what others miss. The truth was in the details." Chapter 11. The Reflection. The morning after the dramatic revelation in the drawing-room of Amberley Hall was one of quiet reckoning. The sun rose over the Devon hills, bathing the estate in a soft, golden light that seemed to cleanse the air of the tension that had gripped it for days. The amber amulet, now safely returned to its rightful place in the family vault, gleamed once more under Lady Eleanor Ashbourne's watchful eye. Yet the scars of betrayal lingered, and the guests moved through the house with a subdued air, their voices hushed, their glances guarded. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated in the morning room with a cup of tea, felt a mix of relief and melancholy. The mystery had been solved, the thief unmasked, but the cost to the Ashbourne family was evident in their strained faces. Hercule Poirot, sitting opposite him with his customary hot chocolate, appeared as composed as ever, though his green eyes held a reflective depth that suggested he, too, felt the weight of the resolution. "Mon ami," Poirot said, setting his cup down with precision, "you are thoughtful this morning. The case is closed, yet you seem troubled." Hastings sighed, stirring his tea. "It's just Beatrice, Poirot. She seemed so—" But her methods, they were flawed. The morning was spent tying up loose ends. Inspector Caldwell, though grudgingly impressed by Poirot's brilliance, supervised the formalities of Beatrice's arrest. She had been taken to the local police station, her confession recorded, though her tearful remorse had softened the edges of her guilt. Charles, devastated by his wife's actions, had retreated to his room, while Clara, still shaken, sought solace in the gardens, her laughter replaced by a quiet sorrow. Lady Eleanor, ever the stoic matriarch, oversaw the restoration of the amulet to the vault, her face a mask of dignity hiding her pain. Poirot, true to his methodical nature, spent the morning reviewing his notes, ensuring every detail of the case was accounted for. He invited Hastings to join him in the library, where the portrait of Lord Henry Ashbourne loomed over the now empty safe. The room, once a stage for deception, seemed to have regained its tranquility, though the faint scuff mark on the floor and the amber wax on the Keats volume remained as silent witnesses to the crime. "Hastings," Poirot said, standing by the small table near the window, "you recall the rose petals, the hairpin, the lavender scent? These were the threads that led us to Madame Beatrice. Each clue was a piece of the truth, carefully placed or carelessly left." Hastings nodded, his mind replaying the dramatic scene of the previous evening. "It was brilliant, Poirot.
How you set that trap with the hidden compartment. You knew it would force her to act. Poirot inclined his head. The trap. It was a psychological necessity. Madame Beatrice, she was clever, but her guilt made her vulnerable. The empty pouch, dropped in haste, was her undoing. Hastings frowned, still puzzled by one detail. But Clara, why was she so afraid to name her father? She saw Charles in the library. But he wasn't the thief. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Mademoiselle Clara. She is young, but her heart is loyal. She feared her father was involved, perhaps in some lesser crime, a debt, a secret. When she saw him near the safe, she panicked, believing he might be blamed. But Charles, he was merely searching for a book, as he said. His absence gave Beatrice her opportunity. Poirot moved to the bookshelf, retrieving the volume of Baltic trade, where the amulet had been hidden. This book, he said, it was a clever choice. Madame Beatrice knew its obscure nature would deter casual discovery. But the wax, the lavender, the hairpin, these betrayed her. As the morning progressed, Poirot met privately with Lady Eleanor, who thanked him with a quiet dignity. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady but heavy, "you have restored our family's honor, though at a cost. Beatrice was my daughter-in-law, out of love for her husband, but also out of resentment for the constraints of your family's wealth. The amulet, it was not just a jewel to her, it was a symbol of freedom." Lady Eleanor nodded, her eyes glistening. "I shall ensure Charles and Clara are cared for. This house, it will heal in time." The other guests, too, sought Poirot out to express their gratitude or relief. Sir Reginald, his bluster subdued, admitted his financial troubles had made him a suspect in his own mind, though he swore his innocence. Dr. Vance, his tic less pronounced, thanked Poirot for clearing the air, while Miss Evelyn Carter, her composure restored, offered a crisp nod of approval. Victor Langston, exonerated at last, was effusive in his gratitude, promising to sing Poirot's praises in London. As the afternoon drew to a close, Poirot and Hastings took a walk in the gardens, the air fresh with the scent of roses. Poirot paused by the lake, his gaze distant. "This case, Hastings," he said, "it reminds us that crime, it is not always born of malice. Sometimes it is born of desperation, of love twisted into error. Madame Beatrice, she sought to save her family, but in doing so, she lost them." Hastings nodded, his heart heavy. "It's a sad business, Poirot. But you saw through it all. The lies, the distractions. How do you do it?" Poirot smiled, tapping his temple. "The little grey cells, mon ami. They see what the heart wishes to hide. They observe the details, the petal, the wax, the scent, and they build the truth from these fragments." As evening approached, Poirot announced his intention to depart Amberley Hall the following morning. "The case, it is solved," he said to Hastings. "The amulet is returned, the thief is revealed, and the family, they will mend in time. Our work here is done." Dinner that evening was a subdued affair, with Clara returning to the table, her eyes still red, but her demeanour calmer. Lady Eleanor presided with quiet strength, and even Sir Reginald managed a few words of kindness. The shadow of Beatrice's betrayal lingered, but the restoration of the amulet seemed to offer a glimmer of hope. After dinner, Poirot and Hastings retired to the drawing-room, where Poirot sipped a tisane and gazed out at the darkening gardens. "Life, Hastings," he said softly. "It is a mystery, greater than any theft. The heart, it drives us to great deeds and great follies. We must always seek the truth, but we must also understand the human soul." Hastings, moved by his friend's words, nodded. "You're right, Poirot. It's not just about solving the crime. It's about understanding why it happened. Poirot rose. He lingered. The mystery of the Amber Amulet had been solved, but its lessons about love, betrayal, and the fragility of trust would stay with him. He knew that Poirot, with his unerring logic and deep understanding of human nature, had once again proven why he was the greatest detective of all. Chapter 12. The Unseen Motive. As if the estate were exhaling after the storm of the previous evening's revelation. The sun filtered through the tall windows, casting a soft glow on the polished floors. But the warmth did little to ease the lingering unease among the guests. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated in the morning room with a cup of tea, felt a mix of relief and curiosity. The Amber Amulet had been recovered, Beatrice Ashburn's guilt exposed, yet something nagged at him, a sense that the full story remained untold. Hercule Poirot, sipping his hot chocolate with his usual precision, seemed to sense this too, his green eyes gleaming with a quiet intensity. "Mon ami," Poirot said, glancing at Hastings. "You are restless, yes? The case is solved, but you feel there is more to uncover." Hastings nodded, setting his cup down. "It's Beatrice, Poirot. I understand her motive, debt, resentment, but it feels too simple. Why risk everything for the amulet? There's something we're missing, isn't there?" Poirot's moustache twitched with a faint smile. "You begin to think like Poirot, Hastings. The surface motive, it is clear, money, power. But beneath, there is always a deeper truth, a hidden wound. Today, we shall explore this." The morning began with Poirot's decision to speak privately with Charles Ashbourne, whose devastation at his wife's betrayal was evident in his gaunt face and hollow eyes. They met in the library, where the portrait of Lord Henry Ashbourne loomed over the now empty safe. Charles sat heavily, his hands clasped, his voice barely above a whisper. "Monsieur Poirot, I can't believe Beatrice did this. I knew we were struggling, but to steal from my mother." Poirot's tone was gentle but probing. "Monsieur Charles, you knew of your wife's financial worries, yes? Did she ever speak of the amulet, of its significance beyond its value?" Charles hesitated, his eyes flickering. She mentioned it once, months ago. She said it was a symbol of mother's control, of how the family's wealth was tied to tradition rather than progress. I thought it was just frustration. Poirot made a note, his pen moving with deliberate care. "And did you ever suspect she might act on this frustration?" Charles shook his head, his voice breaking. "Never. I trusted her completely." Poirot nodded, dismissing a small smile as Poirot approached. "Mademoiselle Clara," he said, sitting beside her. "You were brave to speak last night, to name your father. But I sense there is more you have not said. Why were you so afraid?" Clara's hands twisted her handkerchief. I thought Papa might have taken the amulet. He's been so worried about money. And I overheard him arguing with Mother about it. When I saw him in the library, I panicked. But it wasn't him. It was Mamma." Poirot's gaze was steady. "And your mother, mademoiselle, did she ever confide in you about her plans?" Clara shook her head, tears welling. "No, but she was different lately. Angry, distant. She kept saying we deserved better, that the amulet could change everything." Poirot made another note, his expression unreadable. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have helped more than you know." As the morning progressed, Poirot requested a meeting with Lady Eleanor, who received him in her private study. Her regal poise was intact, but her eyes betrayed a deep sorrow. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "you have saved our family's honor.
But at what cost? Beatrice was like a daughter to me. Poirot bowed slightly. Madame, I understand your pain. But I must ask, did you ever sense Madame Beatrice's resentment toward you? Toward the amulet? Lady Eleanor frowned, her hands folding tightly. She was always dutiful, but there were moments. She spoke of modernizing the estate, of selling assets to fund Charles's research. I dismissed it as youthful idealism. But perhaps I was blind. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And the combination to this safe, could she have observed you entering it? Lady Eleanor hesitated. It's possible. I was not always cautious. The library is a family space, and I trusted everyone. Poirot nodded, his pen scratching softly. Merci, madame. Your honesty brings us closer to the truth. The investigation took a new turn when Poirot revisited the library, focusing on the volume of Baltic trade where the amulet had been hidden. He examined the hollowed-out section, noting its precise craftsmanship. This, he said to Hastings, was not done in haste. Madame Beatrice planned this carefully, perhaps over weeks. But why hide the amulet rather than sell it immediately? Hastings frowned. To avoid suspicion. She couldn't exactly walk out with it. Poirot shook his head. Non, mon ami. There is more. The amulet was not just a means to money. It was a weapon, a way to strike at Lady Eleanor's authority. By hiding it, Beatrice could... Authorities. She entered the library, her sharp features softened by exhaustion, her eyes red from crying. Madame Beatrice, Poirot said, his tone calm but firm. You hid the amulet to hurt Lady Eleanor, yes? But there is more. A letter, partially burned. What did it contain? Beatrice's face paled, and she sank into a chair. You know everything, don't you? She whispered. The letter, it was from a creditor, threatening to expose our debts. I couldn't let that happen. The amulet was our way out, but also I wanted Mother to feel the loss, to see how her control suffocated us. Poirot nodded, his expression softening. You acted out of love for your husband, but also out of anger. The amulet was your rebellion. Beatrice's tears fell freely. I never meant to hurt Clara. I thought I could save us all. Poirot dismissed her gently, turning to Hastings. The unseen motive, Hastings. It was not just money, but pride, resentment, a desire to break free. The amulet was her instrument, but her heart betrayed her. Dinner that evening was a quiet affair, with Beatrice absent and the other guests subdued. Clara sat close to Charles, her hand resting on his, while Lady Eleanor presided with a fragile strength. Sir Reginald, his bluster softened, spoke of rebuilding the family's trust, and Dr. Vance offered quiet words of support. Miss Evelyn Carter, ever efficient, took notes for Lady Eleanor, her composure a stark contrast to the emotional weight of the room. After dinner, Poirot and Hastings retired to the drawing room, where Poirot sipped a tisane and gazed out at the darkening gardens. This case, Hastings, he said softly. It reminds us that crime is not always born of greed. Sometimes it is born of a heart that feels trapped. Madame Beatrice, she sought freedom, but she chose the wrong path. Hastings nodded, his heart heavy. It's tragic, Poirot. She thought she was saving her family, but she tore it apart. Poirot's eyes gleamed, and yet, the truth, it heals as well as wounds. The Ashbournes, they will recover, because they know the truth. As Hastings retired to his room, he felt the weight of the case lifting, though the sadness lingered. The mystery of the Amber Amulet had revealed not just a thief, but the unseen motives that drove her, a lesson in the complexities of the human heart, illuminated by Poirot's unerring logic. Chapter 13. The shadow of doubt. The 10th day at Amberley Hall unfolded with a quiet that felt almost reverent, as if the estate were holding its breath in the aftermath of Beatrice Ashbourne's confession. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows, casting long, delicate shadows across the polished floors. Yet the air remained heavy with the residue of betrayal. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated in the morning room with a cup of tea, found his thoughts lingering on the complexity.
Unmasked, but a lingering sense of unease gnawed at him. Hercule Poirot, sipping his hot chocolate with his usual precision, seemed to sense this, his green eyes gleaming with a reflective intensity. "Mon ami," Poirot said, leaning towards Hastings. "You are troubled, yes? The case is solved, the amulet restored, yet you feel the shadow of doubt." Hastings set his cup down, nodding. "It's just... Beatrice's motive makes sense, Poirot, but it feels like there's still something we haven't seen. Why did she risk so much? And Clara, her fear, her tears. There's more to it, isn't there?" Poirot's moustache twitched with a faint smile. "You grow perceptive, Hastings. The little grey cells, they whisper to you now. The case, it is solved, but there are echoes, small truths that linger in the shadows. Today, we shall listen to them." The morning began with Poirot's decision to revisit the emotional undercurrents of the case, seeking to understand the full scope of Beatrice's actions and their impact on the Ashbourne family. He requested a private meeting with Clara, whose fragile demeanour had become a focal point of his concern. They met in the garden, near the lake where the roses bloomed, their scent mingling with the fresh morning air. Clara sat on a stone bench, her hands clutching her shawl, her eyes still red from crying. "Mademoiselle Clara," Poirot said gently, sitting beside her, "you have been brave, but you carry a burden. Your tears, they are not only for your mother's guilt. What is it you fear?" Clara's voice trembled as she spoke. I knew Mama was unhappy, Monsieur Poirot. She and Papa argued about money, about grandmother's control over the estate. I overheard her talking about the amulet, saying it could change everything. I thought she was just angry. But when I saw Papa in the library that night, I was afraid he was part of it. I couldn't bear to think of either of them as thieves. Poirot's gaze was steady. "And when you learned it was your mother, not your father, what did you feel?" Clara's tears spilled over. "Betrayed, but also guilty. I should have said something sooner, told someone about her anger. Maybe I could have stopped her." Poirot placed a hand on her arm, his voice soft. "No, mademoiselle, the fault is not yours. The heart, it blinds us all at times," he said. "I failed, Beatrice. If I had been stronger, more successful, she wouldn't have felt driven to this." Poirot's tone was kind but firm. "Monsieur Charles, you blame yourself, but the choice was hers. Tell me, did you ever suspect her intentions?" Charles shook his head. "Not until it was too late. She was so protective, always managing our finances, shielding me from the worst. I thought her frustration was just talk. I never imagined she'd steal from Mother." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the amulet, did she speak of it often?" "Only in passing," Charles said. "She called it a relic of the past, a symbol of Mother's refusal to change. I thought it was just her way of venting."
Poirot made another note, his expression unreadable. Merci, monsieur. You have helped clarify the shadows. The investigation took a new turn when Poirot requested to see the burned letter Mary had mentioned, which had been retrieved from Beatrice's fireplace. Inspector Caldwell, who had kept it as evidence, produced the charred fragments, which bore only a few legible words: debt, urgent, exposure. Poirot examined them closely, his magnifying glass glinting in the light. "This letter," he said to Hastings, "it confirms Madame Beatrice's desperation, but also her fear of shame. Exposure. It was her greatest dread." Hastings frowned. "So she stole the amulet to pay the debt and avoid scandal?" Poirot nodded. "Oui, but also to wound Lady Eleanor, to challenge her authority. The amulet was both her salvation and her revenge." The afternoon brought a conversation with Sir Reginald, whose bluster had softened into a grudging respect for Poirot's methods. They met in the billiard room, where Sir Reginald lit a cigar, his hands steadier than before. "You've done a fine job, Poirot," he said. "I thought Langston was our man, but you saw through it all. Still, Beatrice, my own sister-in-law, it's a blow." Poirot inclined his head. "And your own financial troubles, Sir Reginald, did they ever tempt you to consider the amulet?" Sir Reginald flushed. "I won't lie. I've had my share of debts. But steal from Mother? Never. I'd rather sell my horses than touch that jewel." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Your loyalty. It is admirable. But tell me, did you ever hear Madame Beatrice speak of her resentment toward Lady Eleanor?" Sir Reginald hesitated, then nodded. "Once or twice, in private. She thought Mother was too rigid, hoarding the family's wealth. I told her to let it go, but she was stubborn." Poirot made a note, dismissing him with a polite nod. "Merci, Sir Reginald. You have shed light on the shadows." As evening approached, Poirot and Hastings took a walk in the gardens, the air cool and fragrant with roses. Poirot paused by the lake, his gaze acted not just for money, but to break free from a cage she felt around her. Her resentment, her fear of shame. These were the unseen motives that drove her. Hastings nodded, his heart heavy. "And Clara, Charles, they're the ones who suffer most. It's not just the theft, it's the betrayal." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Oui, mon ami. But the truth, it is a balm as well as a wound. The Ashbournes, they will heal, because they understand why it happened." Dinner that evening was a quiet affair, with Lady Eleanor presiding with a fragile strength. Clara and Charles sat close, their bond a quiet defiance against the pain of Beatrice's actions. Sir Reginald spoke of plans to modernize the estate, while Dr. Vance and Miss Evelyn Carter offered measured words of support. Victor Langston, his reputation restored, announced his intention to return to London, grateful for Poirot's intervention. After dinner, Poirot and Hastings retired to the drawing room, where Poirot sipped a tisane and gazed out at the darkening gardens. "The shadow of doubt, Hastings," he said. "It lingers even when the truth is known. But we have done our part. Tomorrow we depart, and Amberley Hall will begin to mend." Hastings, lying awake that night, felt the case's echoes in his mind. The amber wax, the lavender scent, Clara's tears, they were all pieces of a puzzle that revealed not just a crime, but the fragility of trust and the weight of hidden motives. Poirot's genius had brought clarity, but the shadows of doubt would linger, a reminder of the human heart's complexity. Chapter 14. The Echoes of Truth. The 11th day at Amberley Hall unfolded with a quiet dignity, as if the estate were slowly reclaiming its serenity after the storm of betrayal and revelation. The morning sun bathed the gardens in a gentle glow, and the lake sparkled under its touch. But the weight of the past week lingered in the subdued movements of the household. Captain Arthur Hastings, seated in the morning room with a cup of tea, felt a sense of closure tinged with melancholy. The Amber Amulet was secure, Beatrice's guilt exposed. Yet the emotional ripples of the case continued to stir his thoughts. Hercule Poirot, sipping his hot chocolate with meticulous care, seemed to sense this, his green eyes reflecting a calm but probing intensity. "Mon ami," Poirot said, leaning toward Hastings, "you are reflective this morning. The mystery is solved, the truth laid bare. Yet you hear the echoes, yes?" Hastings nodded, setting his cup down. "It's the family, Poirot. Clara, Charles, Lady Eleanor, they've been through so much. Beatrice's betrayal wasn't just about the amulet, was it? It feels like there's still a piece of the story we haven't fully grasped." Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "You see deeply, Hastings. The crime, it is solved. But the heart, listen to these echoes and ensure no shadow remains." The morning began with Poirot's decision to speak with Lady Eleanor, whose strength had been a pillar for the family despite her personal pain. They met in her private study, where the air was heavy with the scent of old books and polished wood. Lady Eleanor sat behind her desk, her hands folded, her face a mask of resolve tinged with sorrow. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady, "you have restored our family's honor, but the cost is great. Beatrice was my daughter-in-law, and I failed to see her desperation. How can I mend what has been broken?" Poirot bowed slightly, his tone gentle. "Madame, you are not to blame for the choices of others. Madame Beatrice acted from a place of resentment and fear, but her love for her family was real. You can mend by showing compassion to her, to Charles, to Clara." Lady Eleanor's eyes glistened. "Clara is so young, and Charles, he is shattered. How do I help them heal?" Poirot's gaze was steady. "With time, madame, and with truth. You have the strength to guide them. The amulet, it is a symbol of your family's endurance, and you will show them the way." Poirot made a note in his small black notebook, his handwriting precise. "One final question, madame. The combination to the safe, did you ever share it, even in passing, with anyone besides Beatrice?" Lady Eleanor frowned, her brow furrowing. "No. But I recall a day, months ago, when Beatrice was in the library while I opened the safe. She was reading, and I thought nothing of it. Could she have seen the combination then?" Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. "It is likely, madame. Her opportunity was born of trust, and her betrayal of desperation. Merci for your candor." Next, Poirot sought out Dr. Harold Vance, whose calm demeanor and persistent tic had intrigued him throughout the case. They met in the billiard room, where the morning light cast long shadows across the green felt. Dr. Vance stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "Monsieur Vance," Poirot said, his tone polite but probing, "you have been a steady presence in this house, yet your tic, it betrays a nervousness. Did you know of Madame Beatrice's plans?" Vance's tic flickered, but his voice was steady. "No, Monsieur Poirot. I suspected she was troubled, her sharpness, her whispers with Charles, but I never imagined she'd steal the amulet. My tic, it's an old habit, worsened by stress." Poirot's eyes now
Afternoon brought a conversation with Miss Evelyn Carter, whose efficiency had masked a quiet intensity throughout the investigation. They met in the study, where she was organizing papers for Lady Eleanor. Her spectacles glinted as she faced Poirot, her posture rigid. "Mademoiselle Carter," Poirot said, "you were close to the library on the night of the theft, yet you heard nothing. Was there ever a moment when you suspected Madame Beatrice?"
Evelyn adjusted her spectacles, her voice crisp. "I suspected no one, Monsieur Poirot. My work keeps me focused, and I avoid family disputes. But I noticed Beatrice's restlessness in recent weeks. She was often in the library, reading obscure books. I thought it odd, but I said nothing." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The Baltic trade volume, perhaps? The one with the hollowed-out section?" Evelyn nodded slowly. "Yes, I saw her with it once. I assumed it was for Charles's research." Poirot made a note, his expression unreadable. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful." As the day progressed, Poirot and Hastings took a walk in the gardens, the air cool and fragrant with the scent of roses. Poirot paused by the lake, his gaze distant. "The echoes of truth, Hastings," he said softly. "They are in the small things. The glance, the hesitation, the unspoken pain. Madame Beatrice's crime was not just a theft. It was a cry for freedom, for recognition. The family. They must now face these echoes." Hastings nodded, his heart heavy. "Clara and Charles, they're the ones who suffer most. How do they move forward after this?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "With love, mon ami, and with forgiveness. The truth, it wounds, but it also sets the path to healing. Lady Eleanor, she will guide them." Dinner that evening was a somber affair, but there were signs of mending. Clara smiled faintly as she spoke with Charles, who seemed to draw strength from her presence. Lady Eleanor presided with quiet grace, her words measured but warm. Sir Reginald, his temper subdued, spoke of plans to support Charles's research, while Dr. Vance and Miss Carter offered quiet encouragement. Victor Langston, preparing to depart for London, expressed his gratitude to Poirot once more. After dinner, Poirot and Hastings retired to the drawing room, where Poirot sipped a tisane and gazed out at the darkening gardens. "This case, Hastings," he said, "it reminds us that truth is not just a solution. It is a mirror. It shows us who we are and who we might become. The Ashbournes, they have seen their reflection, and now they must choose their path." Hastings nodded, moved by his friend's words. "You've given them a chance to rebuild, Poirot. That's more than just solving a crime." Poirot smiled,
guiding those who remain. As Hastings retired to his room, he felt the case's echoes in his own heart. The lavender scent, the amber wax, Clara's tears, Beatrice's desperation. Poirot's genius had unraveled the mystery, but it was his insight into the human soul that left the deepest mark, a reminder that truth, however painful, was the foundation of healing. Chapter 15. The Departure. The 12th and final day at Amberley Hall dawned with a serene clarity, as if the estate itself were ready to release the shadows of the past week. The morning sun bathed the gardens in a golden light, and the lake shimmered with a quiet beauty that seemed to promise renewal. Captain Arthur Hastings, standing in the morning room with his packed suitcase at his side, felt a bittersweet sense of closure. The mystery of the Amber Amulet had been solved, the thief unmasked, and the family set on a path to healing. Yet the emotional weight of the case lingered in his heart. Hercule Poirot, sipping his hot chocolate with his customary precision, radiated a calm satisfaction, his green eyes gleaming with the quiet pride of a job well done. "Mon ami," Poirot said, glancing at Hastings, "you are ready to leave, yes? But you carry the echoes of this case with you, do you not?" Hastings nodded, setting his cup down. "It's hard to let go, Poirot. Beatrice's betrayal, Clara's tears, Charles's pain. It's more than just a theft. It's a family torn apart and trying to mend." Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile. "Oui, Hastings, the crime, it is solved, but the heart, it takes longer to heal. Yet we have given them the truth, and that is the foundation of their recovery." The morning was spent in farewells as Poirot and Hastings prepared to depart for London. Lady Eleanor Ashbourne, ever the regal matriarch, met them in the grand hall,
where the velvet-draped pedestal that had once held the empty amulet case now stood as a symbol of restoration. Her face, though marked by sorrow, carried a renewed strength. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, extending her hand, "you have done more than recover the amulet. You have given us clarity, a chance to rebuild. I am forever in your debt." Poirot bowed, his small frame exuding dignity. "Madame, it is my privilege to serve the truth. Your family, they are strong. They will find their way, with your guidance." Lady Eleanor's eyes glistened, but she nodded. "Clara and Charles, they need time, but I will be there for them. And Beatrice, I will ensure she is treated with fairness." Poirot's gaze was steady. "Your compassion, madame. It is the mark of true strength. The amulet, it is safe. But your family's heart, that is the true treasure." Clara approached next, her youthful face softened by a tentative smile. She clutched a small bouquet of roses from the garden, their petals fresh and vibrant. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice trembling but
clear. "Thank you. I was so afraid, but you helped me see the truth. I'll never forget it." Poirot took her hand gently. "Mademoiselle Clara, your courage was the key to this case. Hold fast to it, and you will help your family heal." Charles Ashbourne, pale but composed, joined them, his scholarly demeanor tempered by a quiet resolve. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "I failed Beatrice, but you've given me a chance to make things right for Clara, for Mother. I won't waste it." Poirot nodded, his expression kind. "Monsieur Charles, the past cannot be changed, but the future, it is yours to shape. Be strong for those you love." Sir Reginald, his bluster replaced by a gruff sincerity, offered a firm handshake. "You're a marvel, Poirot," he said. "Thought Langston was our man, but you saw the truth. I'll be more careful with my suspicions next time." Poirot smiled faintly. "Suspicion, Sir Reginald, is a blunt tool. The truth requires precision." Dr. Harold Vance and Miss Evelyn Carter offered their own farewells, their words measured but genuine. Victor Langston, his reputation restored, was effusive in his gratitude, promising to recommend Poirot to every jeweler in London. "You saved me, Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll never forget it." As the morning drew to a close, Poirot and Hastings took a final walk through the gardens, the air cool and fragrant with the scent of roses. Poirot paused by the lake, his gaze distant. "This case, Hastings," he said softly, "it was not just about the amulet. It was about the fragility of trust, the weight of desperation, and the power of truth to heal. Madame Beatrice, she sought freedom, but she found only chains. The Ashbournes, they will find their way, because they face the truth." Hastings nodded, his heart heavy but hopeful. "You gave them more than a solution, Poirot. You gave them a chance to rebuild, to forgive. That's what makes you extraordinary." Poirot's eyes gleamed, and he tapped his temple. "The little grey cells, mon ami. They find the truth, but it is the heart that understands its meaning. We have done our work, and now we leave Amberley Hall to its future." The departure was simple but poignant. A car waited at the gravel drive, its driver ready to take them to the station. The guests gathered to see them off, their faces a mix of gratitude and resolve. Lady Eleanor stood at the forefront, her hand raised in farewell, while Clara clutched her roses, a tearful smile on her face. Charles stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders, and even Sir Reginald managed a respectful nod. As the car— That is enough. The journey to London was quiet, with Poirot gazing out the window, his mind already turning to the next challenge. Hastings, reflecting on the case, felt a profound admiration for his friend's genius, not just in unraveling the mystery,
but in understanding the human heart. The amber wax, the lavender scent, the rose petals, Clara's tears, all had been pieces of a puzzle that Poirot had assembled with unerring precision, revealing not just a thief, but the motives and emotions that drove her. As the train neared London, Poirot turned to Hastings, his voice soft. "Life, mon ami, it is a mystery greater than any crime. We solve the puzzles we can, and we trust the heart to solve the rest." Hastings smiled, nodding. "You're right, Poirot, and you've given the Ashbournes a chance to do just that." The train pulled into the station, and the two men stepped onto the platform, their silhouettes small against the bustling city. Amberley Hall was behind them, its mystery solved, its echoes fading. But the lessons of the case, about trust, betrayal, and the enduring power of truth, would remain with Hastings, a testament to Poirot's brilliance and the timeless dance of human nature.